for members to availing themselves for today's meeting. I know Friday is usually, well, Friday is a working day, but people use that for traveling. But thank you very much. Now we're working at home, so there is no excuse of traveling and whatever. Today we are getting the second set of presentations, the Strike Plan and APP from Compensation Fund, Productivity SA and Nedlac. We will then request the committee section to take us through who is here. But can I upfront said today it's one of those days that are rare in our committee of not having the members of the executive, both the minister and the DM. The minister is attending a funeral, and then we have and I was also told that the deputy minister has got a bereavement. So it's just one of those days that, at least in this committee, we are proud to say that both they respect and they attend committees, but today is just one of those unfortunate days. And I hope it will be understood by the members of the portfolio committee. We then allow the acting committee secretary to take us through members that are here, and if there are any apologies from members, and then from there we'll hand over to the DG to take us through to the delegation that he is leading. Over to you, Portia.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, as well as colleagues. So far, we have the following members from the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labor. We have Chairperson Honorable Dundra, Honorable Nkabane, Honorable Nonsele, Honorable Mdabe, Honorable Zuma. We also have Honorable Bagrame, Honorable Mkondo, and Honorable Denner. We received 2 apologies. Chairperson, Honorable Kado will join the meeting later at 10, and Mr. Yenana will not be able to attend today. And from the staff, we have myself, Portia Ndabeni, the committee assistant, Sibongiseni Ngcobo, the content advisor, as well as Tebuwa Mukwena, the researcher. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ndabeni, but we would have loved to see your face, but it's fine. We will see your face the other time. DG?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, my colleagues. Chair, we have the CEO of Productivity South Africa, Mr. Motiba. He is with Dr. Sbusiso Sabela, and we have Mr. Sam Murotoba, who's the DDG for Public Employment Services. We have Mr. Vyoma Fata, the Commissioner for Compensation Fund. We have the Executive Director of Nedlac, Ms. Lisa Seftel, and we have staff from the Ministry, Zandi Mweli, and we have the PLO Tando Wababa, and we have Ms. Karabo Bakhakhane and staff from my office chair, Ms. Matapelo Mataboche. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Can I check if we do have any, visitors, and if they are, those that are not from the department nor from Portfolio Committee, can they please tell us who they are? Who is Sham? I can't spell that. Is that person Shamsuddin? Is he from the department?
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, Farhan Shamsuddin. I'm from the Nedlac, the CFO of the Nedlac.
Oh.
So I'll be supporting Ms. Lisa Seftel.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. And who else?
Good morning, Chairperson. My name is Mukhadi Matlachane. I am from Productivity SA, working in the office of Mr. Mutiba. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, those that are coming with entities is fine. And PMG, I don't know why PMG always mute itself and not want to be. No, okay, that's fine. Can we? All right, DG, as you are leading the team, our agenda for today is that we'll get the STRAC plan and APP from compensation fund, and is the first to make a presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll ask Compensation Fund Commissioner, Mr. Mafata, to run through the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you, Mr. Mafata.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to Chair and to the honorable members. Can I be enabled to share the presentation?
We'll be assisting you to do that.
The host, thank you, Chair. It has been done.
It's not yet up. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, so we'll be presenting the strategic plan and summary, as well as the annual performance plan for the year 2021-2022, as well as the budget that is going to resource the.
Yeah,
that will enable the implementation of the annual performance plan. Starting slides are just introductory slide, Chair, the known information about the fund, our mandate, which is derived from the Constitution in terms of Section 27, as well as Section 15 of the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. And the strategic plan that we have, as well as the annual performance plan, is all aimed at achieving the vision that we have set for ourselves of being a world-class provider of sustainable compensation for occupational injuries, diseases, rehabilitation, and reintegration services, Chair. Looking at the strategic plan high level, so our strategic plan of the compensation fund supports three priorities of government: capable, ethical, and developmental state, economic transformation and job creation, as well as consolidating the social wage through reliable and basic services. So these are the three priorities of government that the strategic plan, as well as the annual performance plan of the compensation fund, support, with the impact statements that are outlined in the slide above, with all the activities that we do are aimed at making the impact that is outlined here. When we look at the link between, we have 6 strategic objectives or 6 strategic priorities in the compensation fund that are linked to the MTSF priorities that I spoke to earlier on. So our first one is improving systems of internal control and maintaining financial soundness. And the second one is developing capacity of the fund to deliver according to our mandate. These 2 strategic priorities are supporting the MTSF priority 1 of being of capable, ethical, and developmental state. The second priority, which is economic transformation and job creation, is supported by 2 strategic priorities of the compensation fund. One, ensuring appropriate benefits are delivered to intended beneficiaries efficiently and at a reasonable cost. And then also to contribute to employment and economic growth through rehabilitation and reintegration services of the fund. The last priority of government, consolidating the social wage and through reliable and basic services, is supported by 3 strategic priorities from the fund. One, improving operational efficiency through process reengineering and technological innovation. And the second one being to ensure appropriate benefits are delivered to intended beneficiaries efficiently and at reasonable cost. The last strategic priority that supports MTSF priority is the contributing to employment and economic growth through rehabilitation and reintegration services. So these are the 6 strategic priorities then of the compensation fund and the outcome indicators that we are tracking with regard to the implementation of our strategic plan and our APP. First one, looking at improving the systems of internal control and maintaining financial soundness. The outcome indicators that we are tracking is 1, improving the assessments of return of earnings by employers, increasing the assets of the fund to make sure that we're then able to fund all the activities of fund as well as the improvements in benefits that we're implementing over the next coming years. Also, the improved audit outcomes. We know that the audit outcomes in the fund have not been so positive, and there is a focused effort to make sure that we turn this situation around. Also looking at wasteful and fruitless expenditure, eliminating that as well as the irregular expenditure. And lastly, also looking at the resolution of reported incidents of fraud, because we know also the environment is prone to a lot of unethical conduct, both by internal and external parties. And so we're looking also at making sure that we resolve these as soon as possible. Second one is ensuring appropriate benefits are delivered to intended beneficiaries efficiently and at a reasonable cost. The outcomes that we are looking at there is improving the finalization of compensation benefits that we pay to our claimants, looking at rehabilitation and reintegration of injured workers back into employment. Though the amendments in the law are still in progress, we have already started about 3 or 4 years ago with the rehabilitation and reintegration programs in the fund. And then also looking at the monitoring of performance by the mutuals who have been licensed to assist the fund in carrying out its mandate in the specific sectors. Thirdly, the contribution to employment creation and economic growth through rehabilitation and reintegration programs. First one is contributing to the transformation of the financial sector through the assets managed by asset managers, and also the number of jobs that are created through the presidential youth employment interventions. And lastly, to look at also the number of decent jobs that could be created through the Job Summit initiatives. And we use so to achieve these 3 outcomes, we are then looking at the muscle of assets that we want to grow so that they can be able to contribute. The fourth one is improving the operational efficiencies through process reengineering and technological innovation. Here, the outcome that we are tracking is the integrated claims management system that we are in the process of implementing. The 5th strategic priority is the developing the capacity of the fund to deliver according to its mandate. And here, the outcome that we're looking at is improving the human resource capacity of the compensation fund, both from a skill point of view as well as the numbers. And the last one is embedding an ethical culture and zero tolerance to fraud and corruption. The outcomes that we are tracking is improved ethical culture within the fund, as well as the resolution of reported incidents of fraud and corruption. When we look at there are specific targets that we are tracking over a 5-year period, so that are supporting this indicator. So this slide then just shows all those where we want to end up at the end of the 5-year period of implementing the strategic plan. If you look at the first indicator, we're looking at 95% of employers being assessed, a 10% increase in the assets of the fund, an unqualified audit opinion, 100% elimination of wasteful and fruitless expenditure, and 75% reduction of irregular expenditure by that period. And also the percentage of the all reported incidents of fraud and corruption investigated and resolved. With regard to appropriate benefits that are delivered to beneficiaries, we tracking that by end of the strategic plan period, 95% of all claims would be adjudicated within a reasonable period of time. 100% of benefits paid within 5 days of them being approved. And also 95% of medical benefits being finalized within a reasonable period of time. 90% of severely injured workers enrolled into rehabilitation programs, as well as service agreements signed with mutuals and fully implemented to make sure that the mandate continues to be carried out across all sectors. The contributing to employment and economic growth, 20% of assets of the fund asset. We know that there is by law PIC mandated to manage the assets of the fund, but to contribute towards transformation in the financial services sector, we're then looking at 20% of our total assets managed through the Black Asset Managers via the PIC, and number of jobs that would have been created through the our contribution to those numbers would then be about 300,000, and also 7,000 number of decent jobs that would have been created through our investments. Improving the operational efficiencies through process reengineering and technological innovation here would then be supporting the implementation of the integrated claims management system. We know we started with the claims portion of the system a year ago. We are now starting with the premium side to make sure that we have a fully integrated system by end of 2024. Developing the capacity of the fund, we need to make sure that we maintain a low vacancy rate at any given point. So by 2024-25, we're looking then at 8%. And also we have a visibility and accessibility program of improving access to the services of the compensation fund, as well as visibility of the fund with regards to education programs for workers, knowing that what they're entitled to. So we have a strategy, and there's a 5-year period within which we implementing the strategy. So we're saying by end of the 5th year, 100% of the programs need to have been implemented. Looking at the ethical culture and zero tolerance, 80% of all incidents finalized within that financial year that they are reported in, as well as making sure that the ethics committees are in place, operational, to make sure that we also proactively deal with issues of fraud and corruption, and we're not only reactive in the form of investigating incidents, but making sure that we can prevent those incidents from happening in the first place. Now, to implement the strategic plan, we are now in the 2nd year of the strategic plan, and this annual performance plan then is the set of activities that is planned for this 2021-2022 financial year to support the objectives that we've set in the strategic plan. When we look at it, the fund is divided into 4 programs. When we look at the indicators that we've set for ourselves for the 2021-2022 under program 1, the first one is allocating of funds to small and medium enterprises. We know that the SMME sector is instrumental in creating jobs and contributing to employment creation. So we are now intentional with what we want to allocate towards funding for small businesses, so that they can then also contribute to employment creation. In the 2021-2022 financial year, we're then allocating about 200 million towards funding small businesses, and this figure is going to grow to, I think by the end of the strategic planning period, is almost R1 billion that we would have allocated to SMMEs. The number of jobs created through the Job Summit initiatives and the investment activities of the fund. So in the 2021-2022, all new investments that will be taking place in the 2021-2022, we are targeting to have at least 1,000 jobs, new jobs created through these investments. Looking at the assets of the fund, increasing about 10%. That's the target, to increase by 10% in the current year, and also reducing with regard to dealing with the audit outcomes. The target for the 2020-2021 is to, or 2021-2022, sorry, it's about 75% of all matters that affect the audit opinion, because these are the issues that are then the causes of disclaimers. We want to have these resolved. Wasteful and fruitless expenditure, reduced 50% of the balance, reduced by end of the financial year, and then irregular expenditure about 25% of the balance. The percentage of implementation of the improved visibility and accessibility strategy, as I indicated, this is our strategy of improving access to services of the compensation fund. So the target of the activities that we've identified in the plan, 40% of these need to have been implemented by the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. Cases of fraud, so the target is 65% of all cases that are reported then would then be finalized and investigated within the year that they were reported. Implementing the ethics management program. This is our proactive program of preventing fraud and unethical conduct. So in the 2021-2022, the target we've set is to conduct a detailed ethics risk assessment across all stakeholders. as well as coming up with a plan of how we then address any of the risks that would have been identified through that assessment in the 2021-2022. Looking at the reduction in the vacancy rate, target is then 9.9% of vacancies. We know that we're not likely to keep a 0% vacancy because of movements. We also, when we promote within, so we create vacancies also in some of the areas, but we want to manage and make sure that this doesn't exceed 10%. The number of quarterly and annual reports monitored for mutuals who are then supporting the funding delivering of the mandate. So we're then also tracking the reports that the board uses also to look at, to monitor and evaluate the impact that the mutuals make in the delivering of the COID mandate. This just then summarizes the Program 1 indicators. Jeff went through all of them. I can move to Program 2, which is COID services. This is the first of our 3 core business units that is responsible for registration of employers, registration of claims, assessment of employers, as well as adjudication of claims. The first target we have here is the percentage of received return of earnings that needs to be assessed on an annual basis. The target that we've set for 2021-2022 is that 85% of all employers who've submitted ROEs are assessed within the financial year. Second one is also the percentage of claims that are received are adjudicated within 30 working days. The target for 2021-22 is 85% of claims adjudicated within 30 days. In the last financial year, the year that just ended, this target was sitting at about within 40 working days. So we are progressively reducing this. By the end of the strategic planning period, this would have reduced to almost claims being adjudicated within 5 working days of receipt. The percentage of approved benefits paid within 5 working days. Once a claim has been adjudicated, liability accepted, and all documentation submitted and the claim has been finalized, we then authorize it for payment. So the target is to make sure that these are, in 2021, 2022, 90% of the claims are paid within 5 working days. And this is the standard that we maintain. This brings in an allowance also for days where we may have either a system downtime, or you may have some claims not being payable, either owing to unavailability of either banking details or whatever the case may be. So we then set a target of about 90% minimum should be paid within 5 working days. This slide then summarizes the Program 2 indicators. Program 3 is the second of our core business units. It also focuses then on medical services as well as medical claims payments. So the first indicator that we're tracking is the percentage of requests for pre-authorizations where workers require either specialized medical treatment or the claim needs to be reopened because they need to undergo a medical procedure. So the target we've set is that once we receive such a request from the treating physician or the treating practitioner, we then need to finalize this approval within 10 working days of receipt, 90 days and 90%, and we hoping to improve this over the period to almost 95%. The second indicator here is the percentage of accepted medical invoices that are finalized within 40 working days of receipt. And the target here is 80% for 2021-2022 within 40 working days. The target for the year that just ended was at 60 days. We've now reduced this progressively to 40 days, and we, over the life of the strategic plan, by the end of it, we would have reduced this to about 90% of invoices paid within 15 working days. This slide then just summarizes the indicators for the medical benefits. The last program that we have, which is one of our core business, is the rehabilitation and orthotic services. I did indicate that we started already implementing rehabilitation and services already about 4 years ago. So now here the percentage of requests for assistive devices finalized within 15 working days. The target is to have 85% of these finalized within 15 working days. This is where both the pensioners of the compensation fund and those that have recently been disabled, where they then require assistive devices to be issued to them. So the standard is within 15 working days, this should be finalized, and the worker or the injured worker should then be sitting with his or her device. We also then, part of the rehabilitation is we're also looking at social rehabilitation and vocational rehabilitation. Now, social rehabilitation, we're looking at all the psychosocial aspects of supporting an injured worker. And part of this support then also entails either where they intend to reskill themselves to go back into the labor market, they can then be assisted. And also from a social support point of view, where they cannot be able to then afford to pay for the higher learning costs for their beneficiaries, we then also step in as part of our psychosocial support to fund such training. So the targets that we set here is the number of learners funded annually for post-school education and training institutions. Sitting the target for 2021-2022 is about 1,145. We have been running this program now for the last 3 years, and we've seen that the numbers are steadily growing, though not at the rate that we want, but a lot of our pensioners are taking the advantage of this, both them and their beneficiaries. Persons with disabilities then are funded to promote access to education and prospects of employment. We also then target both the those that would have been disabled as a result of occupational injuries and diseases, as well as some portion of those that would generally be disabled not as a result of occupational injuries and diseases. We do then offer some bursary programs for them. So the target for 2021-2022 is about 200. This then summarizes the indicators for the rehabilitation and orthotic services. When we look at then the resourcing of the annual performance plan in terms of the budget for the 2021-2022 year, as well as over the 2023-2024 MTF period. On our revenue side, we've budgeted for what, 19 billion rand in revenue, which is largely made up of revenue from the assessments of employers, which is the biggest contributor at 9 billion, as well as the interest earned on the investments that we have through the PIC, and some of the accounting budget for fair value adjustments, as well as the actuarial gains and losses. Those are the 4 that make up the big number that contributes to the 19 billion, and this number is anticipated over the MTF period to grow to about 22 billion. On the expenditure side, we've budgeted about 13.8 billion, which with the biggest contributor of it being the benefits, which is budgeted at about 6 billion. And then we also then have those accounting entries that we budget for. The finance costs for the unwinding of the discounts on our liabilities, as well as the provisions for outstanding claims, as well as the capitalized pension values, as well as the impairment losses for movement or fluctuations in our investments. And then we also then have goods and services, which then pays for the administration of the compensation fund, sitting at 1 billion rands, as well as the compensation of employees. The numbers here would look much higher than they have looked in the past, because the compensation fund is now funding the occupational health and safety inspections fully. We know that the department increased the number of occupational health and safety inspectors last year to with the additional 500. So that has also contributed to a significant increase in the administration budget of the compensation fund. But this is an important investment that we've made, because it would help prevent occupational injuries and diseases in the workplace, and that's the whole rationale for partnering with the occupational health and safety inspections. We also then track the efficiencies in terms of how we spend the money with these 4 ratios. One, the employee costs to total revenue. In terms of the current budget that we have for 2021-2022, the employee cost as a total of revenue is about 5%. When we look at the employee cost as a total of the total expenditure, it's also sitting at around 7%. The target here is to have no more than 10% for either of these 2 ratios. Then we also have the benefits to the contributions ratio. The benefits that we pay is make up about 31% of the total contributions that we collect. And on the admin side, the admin costs as a percentage of revenue is also sitting at 5% for 2021-2022. The target also is to maintain this below 10%. That's the end of my presentation, Chair. Maybe just in conclusion, Chair, apologies. So the budget that we have, the two things that we have not factored into the budget is the effects of the COID Amendment Bill, especially in the outer years of the MTF period, 2022-2023. We know that there is a lot of improvements in the benefits that is going to come about as a result of the COID Amendment Bill. So that is also going to increase the costs of benefits, including the rehabilitation, which is going to be carried out at a much larger scale that we are doing now. So this has not been factored in, but we will then factor it in when we do the adjustment budgets, depending on where the COID Amendment Bill process is at the end of the financial year. And also we know that we've implemented a new employer classification model with effect from the 1st of April, which results in some employers either having reduced assessment rates and others some increased assessment rate, but the overall impact is the net reduction in the revenue that we may collect in the first year of implementation. However, over the 5-year period of implementation, it's going to neutralize. But so that impact is also was not in the budget at the time when we had the budget approved. We had just concluded our processes at Nedlac with the social partners, so it had not been published yet. The investment income and fair value adjustments also then assume that would be a positive economic growth, and so any change to this forecast would then result in much less investment revenue, as well as the fair value adjustments being at a loss. That's the end of my presentation, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mafate. I have just received, the DG has just requested to be excused. He had some unwelcome visitors in his house, and now he's attending to that with the police. So he will join us when he's done. Can we have the next presentation from the Productivity SA? I'm not quite sure your hand is up, Honorable Bagram.
Thank you. I put it up. I thought you were going to take questions, but I'm happy to go through all the presentations first, whatever you've made a decision on. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Productivity SA.
Thank you, Chairperson.
You may continue, sir.
I'm trying to load the presentation. Can I verify if the presentation is on the screen? Thank you very much.
From my side, I don't know with other members.
It is available, Chair.
Are we?
Yeah, we can see it, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are presenting the strategic plan as well as the annual performance plan of Productivity SA. Just to start off on this slide 3 up to slide 7, it's more issues relating to the mandate of the NDT as well as other legislative mandates. But on this slide, I just want to emphasize the issues that we are talking to in relation to addressing productivity holistically. Chair, you would recall that in our various interactions, there's always this issue about locating Productivity SA in the economic as well as labor market landscape. and the fact that we don't have a voice. And over this medium-term strategic framework, we've taken a resolve that says, let's focus our energy on addressing productivity holistically, to the extent that there are 3 levels at which we'll be looking at that. First is at a country level, which also has implications for policy. At an industry level, if you note that the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is now focusing on sector master plan. So our interventions are also looking into that space. And then we will continue intervening at enterprise level, where we are in a position to support enterprises, both those that are doing well, but to improve their competitiveness, and also those that are going through distress, in order to intervene and support them so that we save jobs. So this is very critical for us as we move towards 2024, also in support of the National Development Plan. I will then skip all the slides, Chair, and request members to go to slide number 10. To the extent that the issues that I raised about supporting productivity holistically, you would realize that our functions are structured in that manner. And to the extent that we are now saying the focus is on enterprise development and support programs, and we have identified 3 programs as part of our reconfiguration of the entity. The first is competitiveness improvement services. The second is business turnaround and recovery. And the third is research, innovation, and statistics. So these 3 programs are externally focused. That is where we're saying supporting the economy and the labor market. You will find that everything that we do will flow from these 3 programs. If we go to slide number 17, on this slide, Chair, we are giving an indication that in our developing the strategic plan as well as the annual performance plan, we're always guided by the government programs, to the extent that the documents that we're presenting before you today are aligned to SONA 2021, and we have extensively looked at the economic reconstruction and recovery plan to identify those issues that are specific to Productivity SA's mandate. And 2 key things are identified. The first one is industrialization of the economy and a massive increase in local production. So a lot of our energy will be focusing on that, as well as an employment stimulus to create jobs and support livelihoods. And as I indicated, 2 key programs of Productivity SA, which is the Competitiveness Improvement Services Program, as well as the Business Turnaround and Recovery Program, are structured in such a way that we will be able to support those 2 priorities of government. From slide 19, we're giving an indication of the 2 priorities over the medium-term strategic framework that we are focusing on. It's priority 1, which is about a capable, ethical, and developmental state. And priority number 2, economic transformation and job creation. So in the strategic plan, starting from the next slides will be indicating what is it that we're doing in terms of priority number 1 and what we're doing in terms of priority number 2. In terms of our impact statement, we are focused on promoting full and productive employment and decent work for all. And this is motivated mostly if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, goal number 8. That has to do with the work that we do. And I want to emphasize that the issue of productive employment and decent work, it's actually gaining prominence. If you look at the ILO Centenary Declaration, it's specific on this. And also from the perspective of also, as I indicated, Sustainable Development Goal 8, this is very critical. And I think there will be a lot of work that will be taking place in partnership with also the International Labour Organization that we will be working on in the coming year. In terms of our priority 1, capable, ethical, and developmental state, the outcome there, it's focusing on functional, efficient, and integrated government. And we set ourselves an outcome indicator that reflects to percentage of SMMEs paid within 30 days of receipt of statement. We're very emphatic on this because there is an outcry there in the small enterprise space that if we don't pay them on time, we contribute to their demise. Worse off that for us who are working with small enterprises to improve their productivity and competitiveness, we cannot be contributing to their failure. So that is why we are elevating this indicator. And the second one is around governance and regulatory compliance, so that we ensure that we reduce fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And Chair and honorable members should realize that we have given the 5-year targets in that regard, as well as the implementing program. On the second priority, the outcome there is support the creation of jobs through job summit commitments and the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, in particular the mass employment stimulus. So you can see that flowing from the job summit in 2018, we pulled out key issues that are specific to the work that we do, so that they reflect in the strategic plan, and also that we've taken a very big interest in terms of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And that is why in this area, we have identified 2 outcome indicators. The first one being the number of jobs created and retained through job summit initiatives. And in that area, over a 5-year term, we are looking at over 40,000 jobs saved, 806 companies facing economic distress supported, establishing at least and training members of workplace or future forums, 2,400 of those, and then also ensuring that over this period of time, we're able to support SMMEs, over 8,000 of them. And then one new indicator that we have in this area, it's around entrepreneurs, workers, and managers capacitated to promote the culture of productivity. And we're looking at over 7,800 over the medium term. I'm raising this, Chair, because the challenges quite often we have in the labor market and the economy, in particular when we talk about productivity issues, is that quite often there is this perception that productivity is about job destruction. And so we have taken this conscious decision that our intervention should be collaborative. When we enter the workplace, it should be in collaboration with management as well as workers, in order that productivity issues become a Thank you. So that productivity issues become a workplace issue as well as a national issue. And then the last one in this regard, it's the focus on productivity champions. We have taken this decision with the understanding that we don't have sufficient resources as an entity to cover the whole country. So the idea behind this is that if we borrowed from the community workers a program in this regard, community development workers in this regard. So we want to populate the country with productivity champions. We believe that once we have those, particularly in the districts, they would assist us because they will be just closer to the enterprises that we have supported. So they will assist us in monitoring as well as additional interventions where required. Furthermore, in terms of economic transformation, we are looking at issues of advocacy and public awareness programs to ensure that productivity is embraced countrywide. The baseline there has always been 10 in the sense that 9, it's in line with the regional, or what we call provincial productivity awards and regional milestones. And the 10th is the national productivity awards that we hold annually. So over the next 5 years, we're targeting 50 of these interventions. This is about ensuring that productivity is embraced countrywide, and also that there's accountability for productivity. These are issues that are reflective of how do we collectively as government, business, and labor contribute to the competitiveness ranking of South Africa improving. So a lot of work is being done in this space. In terms of the annual performance plan, Chairperson and honorable members, as per program 1, we are looking at 3 output indicators. The first one being percentage of SMMEs paid within 30 days of receipt. And our target there, it's 100%. The second indicator is percentage reduction on fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And we're looking here at a 10% reduction from the baseline of over 500,000 Rand. And the third output indicator is percentage of planned training interventions commenced. The focus here is, if you look at the impact of COVID-19, particularly on small enterprises that we're targeting, was that business models of enterprises are changing. They are moving to digitalization and of operations and so on. Now, if we don't capacitate, particularly our productivity practitioners, you would find that we are not able to respond adequately to the demand for our services. So will be embarking on a lot of training of our productivity practitioners so that they are up to scratch in terms of the new developments. If you look at program 2, we're looking at, in terms of the indicator, the number of SMMEs and other enterprises supported through competitiveness improvement services. And our annual target there, it's 1,252. I must upfront indicate this is a drop in the ocean, Chairperson. If you imagine that in this country, we have over 1.7 million small enterprises in the informal economy, and those are the ones that require more of our services. But we believe that this intervention of 1,200 is targeted at those in the productive sectors of the economy. And this is where we're talking about intervening in support of the sector master plans. And that's where we believe that we'll have maximum intervention and outcomes. And then the second one is number of entrepreneurs, workers, and managers capacitated. We are targeting here over 2,000 for this financial year. In terms of program 3, where we're talking about supporting enterprises that are going through distress, here we're looking in terms of indicator, number of jobs saved in companies facing economic distress. And we're looking at least over 9,000 jobs. Again, I must indicate, because of the large challenges that we have, we are also targeting specific areas with a multiplier effect. As we say, the focus of our interventions are in the productive sectors. The second indicator in this regard, it's number of companies facing economic distress supported through the turnaround strategies to retain jobs. We're looking at 191 companies. And the last indicator in this regard is the number of workplace or future forum members trained and capacitated on productivity improvement solutions. The idea here is to ensure that once we have intervened and we've capacitated both management as well as workers, they would at least be able to sustain the momentum. One, they'll be able to identify areas of weaknesses. Even if we're not there, they can on their own be able to intervene. What we have experienced in the 2021 financial year in partnership with the clothing and textile sector is that our interventions in that area has assisted that sector to improve in terms of their operations. And we're beginning to see positive outcomes in that area. We're now going to be doing a lot more in this, and we have sourced also the partnership of the ILO in terms of their SCORE program, so that as we intervene in this sector, we're able to get maximum returns. On program 4, that is our research, innovation, and statistics. We're looking at continuously providing research reports and publications on priority sectors on an annual basis, as well as continuously producing productivity reports. Productivity statistics reports. In this instance, it also includes our contribution to the Institute of Management Development Competitiveness Index, which would we have already finalized the first phase of inputs, and the report would come out in June. This would help us as a country to develop a baseline where we are able to say, this is where we are in this financial year, collectively, how can we, with other strategic partners, improve on the work that we do. In terms of the culture of productivity, we're looking at, as I indicated, the number of productivity awards and regional milestones, milestone workshops hosted. We're looking at 10 during this financial year, and also the number of productivity champions capacitated. We're looking at a target of 323. At this point, Chairperson, with your permission, I would request that our CFO, Dr. Sabela, take the committee through this slide.
Thank you, Dr. Sabela. Over to you.
Honorable Chair and honorable members, the DG and the colleagues, good morning. If the host can move the presentation through the budget slide.
Sorry, Doctor. Is it possible for you, for us to see your face? Turn on your video. Hoping that is not going to interfere with, oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable members, I'll take you through the budget of Productivity SA in the MTSF. I think what is more important or key to highlight on this slide, number one, is the fact that you receive funding from multi-sources, one from the Department of Employment and Labour, instead of our administration program. We also receive funding from the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, instead of our WPC program. We receive funding from Unemployment Insurance Fund, instead of our BTNR, which is the Business Turnaround and Recovery. And then we also do work with the debt. Now, I guess what is important to note on the numbers, and basically what concerns the entity is the movement year on year. If you look at the money that is appropriated by Parliament to the entity, it shifts from 59 to 61, 61 to 62 in the next 3 years. Now, when one looks carefully in the percentage movement year on year, you'll pick up that the movement is indeed below inflation. It then puts pressure or responsibility back to the entity to say, indeed, the fiscal is under distress, and as the entity, we have the responsibility to do more, to go out there and generate revenue for ourselves to ensure that we sustain the entity. So over and above what we get as government grants, we do consulting work. If you look at the line under exchange revenue income from other consulting, we are planning to generate about 15 million of our own over and above what we get as grants. In the following year, we planning to generate about 16 million, and that goes to 16.8. If I can just highlight on the challenges of that is we're planning these values obviously operating under capacity, because at this stage we are operating at about 70% capacity. Nonetheless, we will do our best that we achieve these values to sustain the entity. And I will share, if I can just move swiftly on the total expenditure. If you look, I think what is key to highlight on this line is the compensation of employees. We as the entity have taken a very tough decision, and obviously we are hoping that things may change in the future, but to be conservative, we have decided to keep our compensation for employees number flat. If you look at the next 3 years, it's not moving, it's lying flat. Understanding obviously what we get as appropriation, but it is also moving at about 2-3%. It's not enough. And obviously what we are generating over and above just to supplement what we get from as a grant may not be achieved given again the COVID impacts that we experienced just in the past financial year. So we thought to be conservative, maybe let's just keep those numbers in terms of compensation flat. And obviously we hope for the best, and we will work hard to make sure that wherever there are opportunities and we can generate more, we will revise the position, but at this stage we've left the number flat. So basically my responsibility to ensure that the operations achieve their operational objectives within the confines of the prescript. KPMA is very clear that what we do as an entity has to be done within budget. So basically these are the numbers. So all the targets that the CFO has reflected on will be achieved to the extent of the budget that we have. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Sabela. If then that is the end of the presentation from Productivity SA, can we then get the last presentation, which will be from Nedlac?
Thanks, Chairperson. If I can just share my screen. Chairperson, I hope you can the sharing. Okay. Thank you and good morning to my colleagues and to the honourable members. This is a presentation on our revised strategic plan as well as our annual performance plan. So we agreed in Nedlac with due regard to the fact that last year there were a number of very significant changes that we needed to revise our strategic plan as is provided for in the guidelines from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. And that's really because the role of Nedlac has shifted. We've been doing work on the Presidential Job Summit, on the response to COVID, and in respect of the development and implementation of an economic recovery plan. Similarly, or related, this has meant that the requirements of Nedlac staff and capacity are different, and also that there needs to be increasing capacity to be able to deliver on what we regard as the Nedlac mandate. So we developed a theory of change. I won't go through it in a lot of detail, but obviously our impact remains the same, that social partners contribute meaningfully to processes to address economic growth and social equity. We've identified 3 important outcomes: that Nedlac is effective and accountable, that leaders of the business community, government and labor are able to collaborate to address relevant and important socioeconomic issues, and that the capability of our social partners is enhanced. And out of that, we developed intermediate outcomes for each of the programs. I won't go through them here because I returned to them just now. So essentially, the changes are a new way of characterizing the work of Nedlac, secondly, enhancing the secretariat function, and thirdly, reconceptualizing and enhancing the capacity building of constituencies. So in terms of our revised strategic plan, I won't go through these in a lot of detail because they're also in our APP, but just to mention that we've introduced an annual digital survey of social partners, and we are going to be measured on the feedback that we get from them. So for Nedlac to be efficient, we want over 75% positive feedback. For governance to be effective, that really relates to our ManCo and our EXCO and so on, 75% positive feedback, and then that we deliver all our reports. In terms of our program 2, which is really the heart of the organization, we want to be measured on 3 areas. Firstly, that we convene successful dialogues, webinars, and so on. Secondly, that we reach successful agreements, such as the Eskom Social Compact. And thirdly, that processes are successfully concluded, such as the reports that go to Parliament in respect of legislation that is negotiated or consulted upon in Nedlac. And then also the process relating to socioeconomic disputes. Then in terms of capacity building, we've got a strong focus on this. And again, we are looking at 3 different indicators. One, that the constituencies have tools of the trade, and you can appreciate that in this time, having access to data, having access to devices is very important. that they have technical assistance to engage effectively, and that there is training, including, for example, the annual COSATU or Organized Labor School. In terms of risks, I have listed the risks and the mitigation that's included in our strategic plan. I'm sure you can all appreciate that we're working in an environment of growing complexity. There is the ongoing issue, which is very pertinent, around broader representation. And we are beginning to make progress there. We do have a report, which is going to the governor's task team next week. And then there is the uncertainty and factors outside the control of Nedlac. But I think over the last year, Nedlac has really been able to be agile and have flexible planning so that we can respond to these new situations, and then the issue of capacity. If I then move on to the annual performance plan, we have tried to respond proactively to the shifts in the strategic plan with due regard to ongoing fluidity. I think we've seen that the nature of the COVID pandemic changes, and when we think it's gone down, the next minute we know that we are back in a very precarious situation, as well as the ongoing impacts on the economy and the labor market. The fact that when we started, there was significant relief, and now we're in a much more constrained fiscal environment. The role that Nedlac will play in relationship to economic recovery, I would say that this is work in progress, although I think we're getting a good balance now about what is required and what the social partners would like to see as the role of Nedlac, and then the outcomes of the governance task team. So we've also added a lot of new indicators, which will need to be tested in this financial year. And I'm sure that the portfolio committee will be very useful in giving us feedback in this regard. So in terms of program 1, which is the administration, many of our indicators are similar to those of other entities about receiving an unqualified audit, making sure that our facilities are well managed, that our procurement processes are completed, and this has been a problem in the past, that staff are developed, that our governance is effective, and that we do appropriate monitoring and evaluation. In terms of the operations, we want to make sure that when we hold a dialogue, that the report is released within 14 days, so it's still current. Again, if we want to negotiate an agreement, or the social partners want to negotiate agreement, this can't drag on because it loses its effectiveness. So we want it concluded within 6 months. And then in terms of processes like reports for Nedlac, for acts that come to Parliament, again, we'd like it in 6 months. Personally, I think we should do it in 3. And then when we do standing committee reports, again, it's very important that there is speedy feedback to the applicants if they want to engage on socioeconomic protests. If we go to the issue of capacity building, now with capacity building, the initiative really rests with the social partners, particularly community and labor, that they provide us with a plan, and that Nedlac then needs to deliver according to that plan. So we want to make sure that in terms of tools, in terms of all of them, that we are able to provide 80% of the requests as agreed. And where we don't provide it, it's more, we hope, due to circumstances outside our control, that if you go on a procurement process and it is unresponsive. And then if I come to the risks in the APP, these are more operational risks. Nedlac has had a history of poor financial management, but as you heard earlier on, we have a new CFO, Farhan Samsudin, and we are working really hard on improving our internal controls and putting in place risk management, fraud prevention plans, and so on. And we are also finalizing a code of ethics, both for the Nedlac staff and for the social partners. On staff capacity, there's also work that we're doing around training and development, very important on IT and building facilities, both in terms of being able to be more proactive at a digital level, as well as occupational health and safety for COVID. We have budgeted and have got plans in place. And this is a little bit outside of our control around remote working. I think it does at some level make us go quicker, but at other levels, particularly in respect of mandating, sometimes those processes are slower. Then if we go to the budget, I'm going to ask the CFO to take us through the revenue and expenditure figures. Farhan?
Thank you, Edie. If you can just continue to move the slides as I move along. Yeah, you can go to the, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, members, once again. Yeah, this is a summary budget that we've prepared for the MTEF period for the 3 years, and starting off with 2021-22 in terms of our allocation, which is where majority of our funding comes from. It's at 59 million, and you'll see over the 2 outer years as well, it's roughly about 58.8 million and 59 million. So it's fairly consistent with no significant increase over the three-year period. And then there's another income line item as well, which is close just under 1 million rand for each of the 3 years, which takes us to 59.9 million, 59.7 and 60 million over the 3-year period. So roughly over the 3 years, we're looking at an average of 60 million, just under 60 million total revenue. Edie, we can move to the next slide. In terms of our expenditure as well, we've summarized the budgeted line items. The first one is the compensation of employees, which in 21-22 is for 28.4 million, which is broken down between the salaries and wages as well as benefits, which is the social contributions. And then the goods and services makes up about 31.5 million, taking us back to the 59.9 million. For the 21-22 financial year. I think just in terms of expenditure, a large portion of our expenditure obviously does go to our compensation of employees. I think in terms of the work that we do, a lot of the work that we do is facilitating, coordinating the various structural meetings that takes place at Nedlac. So a lot of our resources do go there, and of course then to the goods and services. And I think over the 3-year period, generally, our expenditure has been budgeted fairly consistently over a 3-year period. Edie, we can move to the next slide. The slide talks to the key budget shifts and the impact of budget cuts. Unfortunately, we were affected by budget cuts over the past financial year, which has been summarized on the left-hand side on the table. I think what's important though is, even though we've received these budget cuts, in terms of our outcomes and outputs, they were not decreased in terms of our APP, in terms of our strategic plan. So we are able to still continue. We do believe that within the current budget that we do have, with the budget cuts, we will still be able to achieve our mandate, because we've sort of shifted the way we plan to spend our budget. If you look towards the right, the budget shifts. It talks to the fact that there is an increased demand for facilitation, research, and negotiation skills, and therefore we've prioritized our resources to financial resources to human resources, capacity building, as well as enabling our IT systems to assist us with working remotely and online meetings. And we've also decreased and deprioritized spending on physical meetings, because I think a lot of our spending would have gone to subsistence and travel and arranging for the various meetings that would take place on a daily basis. So with the move to virtual, we've been able to move some of that funds to assist us and enable us to be ready for COVID and a remote sort of working environment, even if it is potentially virtual as well. It could be a hybrid approach going forward, of course, but I think we are ready for what might come in future. Yeah, Edie, I think that is it in terms of the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson. That's the end of our presentation.
Sorry for that. We received the 3 presentations. We will then, I'll then request members, obviously, they will, the sequence is that we started with productivity, with compensation fund, productivity, and then Nedlac. So when we ask questions, we will then try and follow that. I see we've got 3 hands, Honorable Ndabe, Honorable Kado, Honorable Begram, and Honorable Mkondo, in that order. Can I then, Honorable Ndabe?
morning to you and the honorable members, staff from the entities.
Honorable Mdabe,
Yes, Chairperson, am I audible?
now you are audible. Initially, you were not.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. My first question is related to the compensation fund. Firstly, Chair, is that in their annual performance plan, there is no indication that although we are not discussing the issue of the audit outcomes, but during the during the oral presentations, we were informed by one of the presenters that the department got a disclaimer, or the compensation got a disclaimer. Now, you would recall, Chair, that this is the second year of the 5-year strategic plan during this administration. Especially to us as this portfolio committee, we raised in the first year the issue of the dashboard that the compensation fund needed to make sure that it forms part of their annual performance plan as it relates to various disciplines within the compensation fund as far as management is concerned. We were assured that that would take place, and therefore we would then be given a quarterly report in terms of how are they then performing in addressing the issues that led to the previous disclaimers. And if you look at the 2021 percentage reduction on the audit findings, they raised the issue of 12%. But there is no indication in the current APP as to how are they then going to deal with the issue of reducting. How are they going to deal with in the issue of audit outcomes? The very same question that we raised in their first APP for the 5-year strategic plan. I'm not sure, Chair, whether when we deal with the issues of the compensation fund, we are taken serious as this committee. It seems as if, to me, it's just good for the management of the fund to just draw in salaries without taking into account the issues that are being raised by this portfolio committee, as well as the SCOPA. I'm raising the issue of the SCOPA, Chairperson, because this committee was invited with the department and the fund by SCOPA to deal with the issues of these disclaimers. But it seems as if Parliament is not being respected. I would qualify my statement, Chair. We raised the issue of being given a report 12 months ago based on the quarterly submission by the compensation fund that there would be plus minus 300 claims that they receive on a monthly basis on injured workers. We said, let them give us a report, a high-level report that would be specific, detailing a sector or an industry. As we made an example that here is Sibusiso Mdabe working for ShopRite. He fell on a scaffold, he broke his femur. How much was paid to him? How much was paid to the third party? How much was paid to the medical practitioner or the medical institution? We said at least 5 per province. 12 months has gone by. This committee has not received that report till to date. Yet we are told that the fund it's functional. When we hear the public, the people who interact on a daily basis with the fund, they are saying the fund is dysfunctional, it's inefficient. We have experienced that as this committee, based on a simple thing that we said we want, and we haven't received it. Coming to the issue of what they then are presenting to us. They said on their budget, they've budgeted 1 billion rand for goods and services. If they can then unpack that and tell us, what are those goods and services for 1 billion rand? Secondly, Chair, they have budgeted 3 billion rand plus as a finance cost of the outstanding claims. That then says financially in accounting terms, that money is tripled in terms of outstanding claims. Secondly, is that outstanding amount has generated interest and penalties from the people who are the creditors of the fund. Yet, on paper, in terms of what they are presenting, they are saying they want to make sure that they conclude all the claims that have been submitted within 40 working days. To me, Chair, this remains good in the paper that this information is written on, but practicality, it seems, is not there. Okay. Let me make a firm proposal, Chair. I would like to propose that Productivity SA, DG should then appoint them through legal processes to provide and intervene on improving service delivery in the compensation fund. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mdabe. Honorable Kado.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for each of the entities. Beginning with compensation fund, you stated, Commissioner Mafata, that the budget inputs don't include the effects of the COID amendment bill, which are going to increase benefit costs. And I wanted to know from you, has the compensation fund done any forecasting on the increased benefit costs? And if so, can you give us an idea of the figures involved? Then as far as Productivity SA goes, I've got 2 questions. One is, you referred to productivity champions in your presentation, and I saw in the presentation that their role is to build awareness and promote a stronger culture of productivity. I'm curious to know how they actually do it. What do they actually do, and are they remunerated? And secondly, to Productivity SA, we know that low productivity performance in South Africa reflects the skill shortage and also the high cost of doing business. Why don't you talk more about focusing on improving skills and lowering the cost of doing business, especially for small business people and entrepreneurs? And then finally, 2 questions for Nedlac. One question which I serially ask every time that Nedlac appears before the committee, which is to say that your governance task team was set up about 4 or 5 years ago to review Nedlac statutes and protocols, but we haven't heard much about it in recent times. I'd like to know what outputs that task team has produced and what recommendations it has made to address some of the major criticisms that are often leveled at Nedlac. And then finally, I see that Nedlac's compensation of employees stabilizes over the next 3 financial years at 28.46 million a year. That still constitutes, as you've conceded, a pretty high proportion of your total expenditure, which I work out to be a proportion of 47%. I want to know, what is the average personnel cost per employee at Nedlac? I know last year it was roughly 800,000 Rand a head. And what is being done to tackle the situation? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Kado. Honourable Bagram.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to ask some questions. I'm also going to follow and have some questions for each entity. I'll start off with the compensation fund. I first of all want to thank Commissioner Mafata for the presentation. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Honourable Ndabi for putting my first question to the compensation fund. Thank you very much. In essence, I wanted to know from the fund, how many computer systems have they purchased over the past 10 years? What have been the costs of the various computer systems? And what's the latest cost of the CompEasy thus far? My understanding is that we've spent about R500 million. I might be wrong, so I want to know what it's all about. Also to the compensation fund, they're aware of the numerous complaints that we're receiving on a regular daily basis. They're aware that there's been a complete failure and that most of the private doctors are refusing to see compensation funds patients. Most of the private institutions are refusing to see patients. What are they actually doing about that? They seem to give us a rosy picture, but they don't tell us what they're actually doing about taking the pressure off the state institutions and letting the private institutions see these people. I don't understand. The internal staff, can they tell us how long disciplinary hearings take to be prosecuted internally, and when they have found people guilty of fraud and dereliction of duty and whatever, what about criminal prosecution, and have they had any in the last 2 years? And maybe tell us a little bit about it. The registration of employers has been a nightmare for the past 4 years. And can they explain why it's been such a nightmare? We've also now got a problem where over the COVID period, 50% of many institutions have lost about 50% of their staff. And yet each time they give a return on less 50% of the overheads of staff, the fund says we're going to do an audit. How long do these audits take? And what are they going to do about trying to rush it up? Because people can't do business if they don't have a compliance certificate. And then finally, for the compensation fund, the education employers. We're going to need this desperately, especially in the domestic sector. For Productivity South Africa, thank you for your report. I appreciate it. It needs to be said that our productivity in South Africa is the lowest in the world at the moment. I think it's been like that for almost 10 years. And yet we seem to have a business as usual approach. There's something desperately wrong. Maybe, and I'm just making a suggestion, maybe it's because wages are set anyway, so people don't have to be productive. We've got minimum wages, we've got the industries with minimum wages, etc. So you don't have to really be productive. What do they mean also by decent work? Is that work that is receiving the minimum wage in terms of the law? Is there any other definition for decent work? Keep talking about that. And maybe, and it's just a suggestion from my side, Productivity South Africa could morph into Nedlac. I know Nedlac has very strong representation on Productivity South Africa's board, but couldn't Nedlac run it as well? If you look at slide 8, it tells you a story there. And then again, the regulatory compliance. They said they're going to help people with regulatory compliance. Well, can you imagine if everyone went to Productivity South Africa to try and help them comply with the compensation fund? I think you'd actually sort of bog yourself down completely. We talk about in slide 12 about small businesses, and obviously we need education in the small business sector, especially in the townships where people are trying to grow their businesses. But on the other hand, in slide 13, You talk about it must be more than 20 employees. That cuts out most of the township businesses. There's something wrong here, and we need to have a look at it. I just wanted to point out that the Australian government has just brought out a white paper on small business and job creation and productivity after COVID-19. It might be worthwhile for Productivity SA to have a look at the Australian government's white paper. Then for Nedlac, and sorry, Madam Chair, it won't be much longer. Nedlac, there's been a history of agreements having been reached at Nedlac after much debate. A hell of a lot of money and time, effort has been spent on your debates, and they're very useful debates, and I praise you for it. But somehow those debates get dissed when they arrive at the Parliament and at the legal advisors. Somehow the agreements aren't followed. As we've seen many examples over the years, I won't go through them, but maybe you want to make a comment on that. And then again, I say to you, what about taking over Productivity South Africa? I think you're better placed for it. And then you said about representation, and thank you for putting this in your presentation. I really appreciate it, because we've still got Saftu shouting from the sidelines. And of course, what we have got is there are more unemployed people in South Africa than employed. And we should have a much stronger voice for them. And I must finally end off by saying, well done on your clean audit. You're the only one in the Department of Employment and Labour, so well done. Thank you, Madam Chair, I appreciate it. Madam Chair, I'm finished.
Thank you, Honourable Begram. Honourable Mkondo.
Thanks, Chair, for this opportunity. Good morning to you, honourable members and colleagues. Chair, what has been presented by Honourable Mdabe cannot be put in better words. It needs a very serious consideration. My first question, Chair, will be to the compensation fund, Commissioner Mafata. We all know, Chair, that due to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, many institutions and entities are being affected, and that resulted to budget cuts. How do budget cuts affect them as a compensation fund? Have there any budget cuts that they have experienced? Is there any monitoring tool, Chairperson? That is my second question. Of stakeholders given funds to create jobs. They talked about SMMEs. I just want to check if there is any monitoring tool. And the third question is their success rate in dealing with fraud and corruption. Can they put into a percentage to say, this is the number of cases that have been reported, and we have dealt successfully with so much percentage? My next question, sir, will be to Productivity SA, though it's not directed to them, maybe to us as a committee, Chair, to say, is it possible for this committee to do oversight and be able to assess the impact Productivity SA have on their work that they are doing, the stakeholders and the role players that they are dealing directly with? I think, Chair, if that is possible, can assist this committee to be able to relate what is presented, always presented to this committee, with the true reflection of what is going on outside there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mkondo. Honourable Nontsele.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Good morning, honourable members, colleagues, and the department led by the Director General. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Chair, I think most of my points have been covered with regard, because my question would only go to compensation fund. But I think I need to restate and maybe further clarify the areas that have been raised. Is with regard to the challenge that the fund is facing, that is the continuous disclaimers. And perhaps if the Commissioner can take us into confidence, just to explain to us what in his opinion could have been or could in fact be the major contributor to the continued outcomes, that is the disclaimer outcomes in terms of audit. The reason for the question, Chair, is basically twofold. Firstly, is to understand the extent to which the fund is in fact faced in terms of challenges, but secondly, also to understand the impact of our own oversight visit. Whether, for instance, are there any interventions that would need to be made in this regard. The second related question, Chair, is with regard to the area that again has been raised, that is of budget cuts, but the side around it is on the question of the extent to which these budget cuts vis-a-vis also the operations that currently, if you look in terms of the presentations across, there's been this notion that's about automation. The extent to which the fund has been able to deal with that. Lastly, Chair, is with regard to, again, on the fund, in terms of their priorities on the asset managed by the Black asset managers is 20%, which has been there for quite some time. And perhaps if the Commissioner again can in fact just elaborate on the progress that has been made in the past years, and whether, for instance, are we making any meaningful impact with regard to this prioritization, so that we can argue, in fact, in terms, for instance, of whether we should not, in fact, be upscaling that, so that it does not remain perpetually where it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. On my side, just two questions. From one Productivity SA and the other one Compensation Fund. If then I think the question may have been asked, but I want to open it more and elaborate on it. In 2019, when you presented to us your STREC plan, you said you are going to you have got a plan for turning around the situation in the institution, which is Compensation Fund. And in my observations, as we move around, as what Honorable Ndabe have said, there is nothing that is forthcoming on that. Is it possible that now you can really take us into confidence? If you are able to do that, if you are not able to do that, what are the causal factors to that? So I'm just I'm pointing into that, your turnaround plan. If I still remember, if it was not our first or our second meeting as this committee in 2019. Productivity SA it's a question that relates to productivity at workplace issues. My question will be, have you tried to understand more from workers themselves, both with the employers, what may be a challenge? Are workers, do they understand the concept of entailed in productivity as what the employer will have that understanding? I'm raising this because in your workshop that we conducted last year, I think the chair of the board did allude to the fact that in the minds of workers, when you talk about productivity at the workplace, to them, they relate that to, well, that means we're going to be retrenched. What have you tried to do that? And if you have, is it bearing fruits? And what would then be your observations in terms of the understanding of workers in terms of productivity? Let me just give you an example of what I was told by one of the managers in one of the subsidiary factories that supply VW. There were a group of women that were given at the workplace a project that they must produce masks for the company. And they kept on saying, this is not our work, we must not be rushed about this. They took their own time. And then that project was then taken from that company and it was relocated to another company outside the Eastern Cape province, because they just couldn't understand why should we be chased and be forced to do something, whereas it was more, this man was saying, this was more about also empowering them in their skills and in moving forward. And I hope my example, and he was then saying, we're just talking without him knowing where I am, which company, which committee I am deployed to. He said, Sisi, I so wish workers can, in the minds of workers, productivity is always linked with either they are being overworked or they are going to be retrenched. So I just want to that's why I'm asking that question. And with the understanding, therefore, that everybody here has got the responsibility to play in making people to understand, but as productivity is within your domain, in terms of ensuring that people understand that. To Nedlac, the DG responded, should I say profoundly, when the department, when CCMA was presenting, and the concern of all of us in terms of the workload, now that there are budget cuts and the workload to CCMA. And the comment was, the response was about also, yes, there is an influx, a huge one in terms of people going to CCMA. But we are not looking into, again, the role of the employer in ensuring that the engagements at a workplace are objective and are trying to minimize the process of really people have to be retrenched. We know that retrenchment is the last resort, but the act is stipulating that workers are to be engaged. I'm raising this to Nedlac precisely because social partners are there. Don't you think that it's going to be important that at a particular time, Nedlac engages with all social partners, in particular the employer and labor, because it can never be only the responsibility, because at times as the committee, maybe because of frustrations, we always think that government is to shoulder everything. And some of the employers, I think, they're being mischievous on this. They want the blame to be shouldered by government. And I'm not talking government here. When government is not doing its work through, now we're talking about the Minister of Employment and Labor, we'll have to raise that. But where we think that it's unfair, I'm lacking a better word, to shoulder everything on matters that are the responsibility of all social partners, including community for that matter. So it's something that may be outside your strike plan, but it's something that is very important because it affects one of our most important entities, which is CCMA. That will be my last. I see that there are still, I don't know whether it's old hands. I would appreciate if members can lower their hands, please. Honorable Nunzele, Honorable Mkondo, Honorable Mdabe. Yeah. All right. I will, because we have 3 presentations and we've asked questions on all of them. Can we just have a 5 minutes comfort break and then allow them to just sort out themselves and we'll come back. Don't log out, it's just 5 minutes comfort break. Thank you, honorable members. Agreed on 5 minutes comfort break? Do I still have a committee to chair? Everybody is silent.
I'm very comfortable, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Wigram.
Yes, Chair, you do have a committee.
Oh, okay. Just 5 minutes break. Thank you. Can we then, are we all here? Can we then allow the responses from all entities? Which one wants to start? Are we all back?
Chair,
I'm all here.
We're back, Chair.
Chair, may productivity SA start?
Can I first check, are all members here? Especially those that are...
Yes, we are here, Chair.
Okay. I see Honorable Nonsela, Honorable Ndabe, in particular those that ask questions, but everybody must be back. But I
We're
would...
back.
Okay, all right. Honorable Ndabe, are you back?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Okay, all right. Honorable Kado, I would assume you're also back.
Yes, Chair.
All right, Productivity SA wants to start.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks for the questions that has been raised. I think they are very helpful, particularly as we shape our agenda moving forward. We note the issue raised by Honorable Ndabe relating to Productivity SA assisting the compensation fund to improve their operational efficiency. And I think that would be taken up with the DG and the Commissioner if a need arises that they would want to have us involved in that space. We appreciate that input. The issues raised by Honorable Kado, the first one relate to productivity champions. At one level, it's why this type of approach, and at the second level, it's whether the people participating in the program are being paid. Just to indicate that, as we said, the productivity champions approach, it's modeled around community development workers. And in this regard, we have entered into a partnership with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and we are implementing one of their learnership and internship program, which is called IDUKISE. Just to indicate that in the 2020-21 financial year, we were able to place over 385 interns in the companies that we are supporting as Productivity SA. And the target in terms of these interns are those with industrial engineering or operations management qualifications. Now, part of our interventions is to precisely capacitate them on productivity and operational efficiency issues, so that they then, in the period of their internship, they can start off with that level of appreciation of productivity. In terms of funding, we have already struck a partnership with the Limpopo Economic Development Department, and they are keen on taking some of these people once they finish, so that they can place them in their respective districts. And that's something that we are also discussing with other provincial economic development departments, with a view that we can be able to place this interns both in the districts as well as in the entities in the provinces. So that's the plan moving forward. The idea is to populate the country with people with capability to drive this agenda. The second issue that you raised, Honorable Kado, it's relating to low productivity, and we all agree that low productivity leads to the cost of doing business, because productivity is about lowering cost, it's about improving speed, and also improving the quality of your products. Now, as you're suggesting, that why not focus on small enterprises? Indeed, that's the focus of our interventions, to the extent that just towards the end of the 2021 financial year, we're able to sign a memorandum of understanding with the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as Small Business Institute, and in collaboration with SEDA and the Department of Small Business Development. Our focus in the coming years, it's mostly in the small enterprises. So your recommendation, it's appreciated, and definitely that's our focus. Honorable Bahrain, we agree with you that there's low productivity rates in the country, and that has been confirmed by evidence in terms of our own productivity statistics reports, and that is also confirmed by the Institute of Management Development Competitiveness Index, to the extent that having gone through all these reports and various studies, as you recommended, the study as per the Australian paper, we have actually gone out to sign a memorandum of understanding as well with the International Labour Organization, precisely that we implement their SCORE program in the country. So it's not business as usual. And there's a number of partners who are coming to the table, including those from an international perspective, who are beginning to see the work that we do, and they are partnering with us in implementing our programs in the country. To also indicate that the decent work concept that we are following is as per the International Labour Organization. And the essence of our intervention is, as much as you improve the productivity side of doing things, there should also be benefits for workers. Issues around safety are also taken into account, because if they are in a safe workplace, then they become productive. And also, if they are productive, we always encourage that the benefits of productivity should be equitably shared. We note the comment that perhaps there should be a consideration to shift Productivity SA to the work that Nedlac does. We would advise that would probably not be the right thing to do. If you look at what productivity centers across the world do, which a business model is premised on that. But I think the issue is the work that the Nedlac does and Productivity SA does are complementary. And you're correct, if you look at our constituency, I mean, if you look at our boards, the Board of Productivity SA definitely is constituted of the Nedlac constituency. So there is a lot of complementarity in terms of the work that we do in this regard, to the extent that you will also find that committees that have been established, one, to deal with job summit interventions in terms of TERS, as well as economic reconstruction and recovery plan interventions in terms of support to small enterprises. We participate in those work streams and are making meaningful inputs in that space. The issue as recommend the Australian paper, we will definitely look at that. We've looked at other models, and just to indicate that Switzerland is also, we're in discussions with them in terms of the SCORE program, and we believe that some of these lessons on the international space will be very critical. Honorable Mkonto, it's correct that for all intents and purposes, if work does not show impact, it's not worth undertaking. And we are very open to the proposal that there should be an oversight conducted by the committee to verify and measure the impact of our interventions on the ground, particularly on two levels. At one level, the enterprises that we have assisted, have they really shifted in terms of operational efficiency? And then those that faced economic distress and had the prospect of retrenching workers, were we able to intervene and save jobs? Chairperson, in terms of the issues that you're raising, I think at one level is productivity embraced holistically, including by workers, and our workers seeing the benefits of their being productive. I think this is linked to the issue being raised by Honorable Mkonto, and I think that we have seen evidence. We do have evidence to that effect, particularly when you look at the companies that we assisted and those that we elevate into our productivity evaluation and awards system. Most of the times you'll find that actually it is workers who give testimony in terms of how their understanding of productivity has improved, the way things are happening on the ground, and also the benefits thereof. But with the level of interventions, we can't cover too much, but I think it's the right thing to do. Remember that in our interventions, the issue of workplace collaboration cut across all our programs. That is why we, even when you talk about the business turnaround and recovery program, one of the things that we do in those workplaces is to establish future forums. Now, future forums are a committee of both, representing both workers and management. And we take them through the processes over a period of that 9 months so that they own the process. And we also have what we call workplace interventions on the ground, and those also include the workers in terms of the programs that we do. So although the reality is productivity is not broadly appreciated, but we have been moving very strongly also to indicate that it's not about job distraction, but it is more about improving efficiencies for the benefit of both the enterprise in terms of workers and management. It's something that we still have to do more, but I think we're covering that ground. Thank you.
Thank you, CO. Can we now, which one come? I can see Nedlac is ready.
I'm ready, but I can also defer to the Compensation Commissioner since he started this morning.
Lisa, I'm chairing.
Thanks, Chairperson. So I'll just answer the questions in the order in which they were posed. Honorable Carter asked his serial question about the governance task team. So in terms of the outputs produced, last year, I think in about September, we procured the services of the ILO and MISTRA to conduct a research study on how Nedlac should become fit for purpose, what is the nature of the leadership that is required for Nedlac for the next 25 years. They interviewed over 40 people. They have produced a research report with recommendations, and that research report is going to be presented to the governance task team next week, Thursday. We are then hoping to have a workshop and develop a set of recommendations which would need to be approved by the MANCO and EXCO. And then I'm hoping that if that happens, that Nedlac would then seek to implement in a methodical way the recommendations of MANCO and EXCO. So I do hope that the next time we report here, that we will be able to have content progress and maybe even present to this committee the results of that study. In terms of the issue of salaries, I'm going to ask the CFO to respond to that after I've concluded. I think in respect of the Honourable Bagran around morphing Productivity SA into Nedlac, I think that question has been adequately addressed by Mr. Mutiba. We play complementary roles, and to some extent, I think my answer also covers what was being asked around retrenchments. The CCMA plays a particular role in relationship to retrenchments. It's codified in terms of the LRA. However, I think, Honourable Chairperson, the point that you make is important, that there is scope for dialogue at Nedlac about the respective roles, not only of government, but of business as well, in relationship to limiting retrenchments. And in fact, that was a commitment that was made in the Economic Recovery Action Plan, which the social partners agreed on in September. And I think we will pursue it, and we'll remind business and labor that there is that commitment that they should be pursuing. There was also, again, the issue of representativity raised by Honourable Bagram. Yes, SAFTU is on the sidelines as far as Nedlac is concerned. I think in October, November last year, they made an application to also be part of Nedlac. Unfortunately, they couldn't meet all the requirements around annual financial statements. And as I understand, they are still striving to do so, and when they've done so, then the application can be considered. Thank you for your honourable mentions or your around our audit from last year. I think, Chairperson, if I can hand over then to the CFO to answer the question about personnel costs.
Thank you, Idian. To you, Chairperson. The average cost to company for Nedlac staff is 630,000. This excludes the executive management positions. These both were benchmarked as well for again similar posts at similar sized organizations, and therefore is in line with those organizations as well. So I think for the average is, to answer the question, the average is about 630,000 as the average, Chairperson. Thank you.
Chairperson, maybe just to add that the amount that we quoted the last time we were here, unfortunately, was a mistake because it included some historical corrections that were made in the last financial year. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Thank you, Lisa. Can we then get this compensation fund? I hope the DG is back. DG, are you back? DG? Can somebody check the DG for me if he's able to? I see he has logged in, but I just want to check if he's going to be able to come back. Mr. Mafata?
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you to all the honorable members for the questions. I will start with Honorable Mdabe's questions. Honorable Mdabe's first question, I will link it also to Honorable Nonzela's first question when I respond. So in the APP, even in the strategic plan, we have highlighted that the improvement of the audit outcomes is one of our key strategic focus areas. In fact, in the 2021-2022, we have targeted, there's a target there of saying reducing a number of matters that are affecting the audit opinion, about 75% of those in the current year. And you'll see that over the life of the strategic plan, by end of 2024, we want to have been at a clean audit or an unqualified audit. Now, Chair, so the issues Honorable Nonzela asked that we must take the committee into the confidence in terms of what are the major contributors to the audit outcomes and understanding the challenges. So the audit outcomes of the compensation fund are mainly in the two areas, in the claims space as well as in the revenue. Now, when it comes to the claims, we have seen a lot of noise that has been around the implementation of our new system, and we have previously indicated to the committee that a large number of the internal control deficiencies that had been identified and highlighted by the Auditor General related not only to business processes, but it also related largely to do with the systems within which we process our claims. So the implementation of the new claims management system was basically then aimed at addressing those control weaknesses that had been identified. And we have explained previously to the committee some of those changes that we've made that have made a lot of people unhappy with some of the controls that we've implemented, because those are the weaknesses that existed in the past that allowed the compensation fund to be exploited, as well as some of the beneficiaries. And most importantly, it also then contributed also to the fund's inability to be able to produce verifiable data that supports the claims that have been paid as required by the Auditor General. So we have implemented a new system that is aimed at dealing with these issues, and that's why we have also unapologetically supported the changes that we've made in the business processes and the systems of the fund, and working with stakeholders to teach them as well as support them in how they can then adapt to some of the changes that have been made with regards to submission of claims and also how we process the claims. It is an ongoing process. This will be the first year that the Auditor General will be auditing the compensation fund on the COMP-EASY system with regard to the claims that have been paid. And we're confident that the issues that have been raised in the past with regards to claims will not be raised. And any issues that will be picked up by the Auditor General would mainly be for improvement of some of the already existing controls that we've now implemented. We also then have a history of the claims that are in the past. As a compensation, as a public entity, we prepare our financial statements in accrual format. So there are some of those issues that in the past, because of the past disclaimers, we're carrying those in our balance sheet. So we then also need to do some prior adjustments and clean up of some of those issues. So those are some of the issues that would only still be picked up by the Auditor General. When it comes to the issues around revenue, there's a number of issues that the Auditor General has spoken about that are contributing to audit disclaimer. Some of those had to do with the policies, some of them had to do with business processes, and some also had to do with system weaknesses with regards to controls. There has been a number of policy interventions that we have implemented over the last 2 years. I think there's a lot of notices that the DG has issued, there's regulations that the minister has also issued in the last year, all aimed at addressing some of the issues. So what the Auditor General has been saying is that they aren't able to verify whether the revenue we have is complete because there is employers that may be registered in incorrect classes. There is maybe inadequate controls around variation of assessments. Honorable Bagram asked a question about the employers that are being flagged for audit, which is linked to this particular item. The employers that inability to verify if the return of earnings submitted by employers are true and correct, the timing of submission of return of earnings and so on. So we have, because of the policy interventions that we have implemented, some of them have taken much longer. We've had to do consultations at Nedlac, particularly around the changes in the classification of employers, which is one major policy change that is aimed at addressing a large number of the issues that are causing disclaimers on the revenue side. The consultations and Nedlac took us about 18 months or so to conclude. The minister published the regulation in December last year for implementation, for effective implementation from the 1st of April this year. So we have now implemented the new classification model, which aims to reduce the complexity of the assessment model as well as address the problem that we have. Because the problem we have out here is that a lot of agents go out to employers and want to sell two things to employers. They want to sell efficiency, and they're also selling the fact that they can assist employers to get credits from the compensation fund and get huge refunds in exchange for suppose a percentage of whatever money that they would get as refunds from the compensation fund. How then they want to get these refunds? They would then claim that employers have been registered in incorrect classes. An employer doesn't operate in a specific class because maybe it's a high risk class that attracts a higher premium. And they would then claim that some of these misclassification has occurred from a specific point in time, hoping that if the fund agrees to such a reclassification, it would result in a refund that would go to an employer. It would also result in an employer also getting a much less premium to pay. In some cases, also we've had employers who have been unfairly and unduly allocated discounts in terms of Section 85 of the COID Act, claiming that they have much less claims experience, and also that they have implemented measures in the workplace to reduce incidents. And how sometimes these things come across, you then get instances where employers don't want to register claims because they want to maintain a safer, they want to maintain lower claims rate so that they can benefit from some of these things. So these are all the changes that we've made in the last year. For example, we've canceled all some of these Section 85 reductions as well as loadings on claims to allow employers to apply afresh so that we can apply the improved controls that we've implemented now with regard to this particular section of the law. Employers are this year now submitting their returns based on the new assessment classification that we've implemented. It is going to take us a bit of time to fully address all the issues on the revenue side, but some of these interventions that we've put in place now, and some of them are still also not going to make some of the stakeholders happy, because it unfortunately would result in some of them who have been unfairly and benefiting from some of the unethical practices that have existed in the past. Some of those things we are putting a stop to it, and we have seen some of the employers already complaining because they have gotten away, so for example, with paying much less premiums than they should. And now that the issues have been corrected, they find themselves in this year having to pay much higher premiums than they were used to in the past. So there was, in a sense, some bit of entitlement created by some of the employers as a result of the interventions. And we also, when we walk around, we see most of the things that the point I raised earlier, that some of these private parties would sell efficiency to employers. They don't want employers to come directly to the compensation fund, and they would then want this to happen through them. We see adverts of every now and then on the road where people are saying, if you want to register for UIF or for compensation fund, this is how much it would cost you, we can do it for you. So obviously parties like those, they sell efficiency, so they will never go out publicly and say the compensation fund is working or there's efficiency. They'll always want to argue that there's inefficiencies and things are not working at the compensation fund. Because if things are working, then it means their business will then cease to exist. We have created online platforms, for example, now. No employer has to go through anybody else to register for the compensation fund for the first time. With online platforms, we've created the same platform for domestic employers as well to enable that. The issues around the dashboard report that has been requested. So we do have an action plan, as we indicated to the committee in the past, that is part of our turnaround strategy to address all the pain points of the compensation fund from a service delivery point of view, from a financial management point of view, from a skills and people management issues point of view, as well as business processes. And we have said that we will present to the committee when I think the misunderstanding on our part would have been that we would have thought that the committee would have invited us to then come and present the progress reports on a quarterly basis. But I think what we will do will then make sure that we submit the reports religiously at the end of every quarter, because we do produce these reports every month, because we track the implementation of the turnaround strategy on a monthly basis. We apologize for that, Chairperson and honorable members. We do take the committee seriously, and we do take the issues that have been raised by the committee seriously. It was an oversight on our part also, the report that Honorable Ndabisa was requested 12 months ago. I think after our last sitting, we've actually requested the development of this report that Honorable Ndabisa is talking about, because it's quite an involved report, because it requires us to combine a number of activities within the claims process to produce a single report. So our team is busy working on it. We are going to submit that report. And once that report is developed, it would be easy then to even produce it and even submit it to the committee on a monthly basis if required. The 1 billion rands for goods and services unpacking, we will provide, we do have the details of that budget here. We'll submit that to the Secretariat with the details of what is comprised in the 1 billion. The 3 billion rands in outstanding claims share, I just want to explain that. So what this means is we have not budgeted for interest that we're going to pay for unpaid claims. I previously said that we budget on accrual basis. So there's two provisions that we create on our balance sheet at the end of every year. All the pensions that have been approved, we capitalize those pensions and we put them on the balance sheet as a capitalized pensions that are payable over the life of a pension. So if Vuyamafata gets injured in the workplace and his permanent disability is calculated, then he's entitled to a pension. In terms of the standards, we're required to then calculate how much is, based on Vuyamafata's age today, how much pensions will be payable to this particular person from today up until the estimated end of his life. So the total amount of pensions, we're then forced to capitalize it on the balance sheet and put that money aside for the pension. So there is a concept that what you put aside today is would not be worth the same in future. So what we then required to do is we need to calculate the time value of money between now and the future when we've allocated this money. We then apply finance charges to it over the period of the liability. So we then have to carry this in our income statements on an annual basis. But because we are budgeting on an accrual basis, we also then have to budget for these charges that are related to this time value of money for the future pensions liability. So that's what all that 3 billion that is in the budget is for. So it's what the charges that we're going to apply to those pensions liabilities for the 2021-2022 financial year. Honorable Karo asked us about the budget inputs where we have not included the COID amendment bill. We have done some costing, and what we were tracking in our costing was with the actuaries was looking at the combined ratio in terms of how is the ratio of claims to the revenue that we collect. How is it going to look like once all the improvements in the Act have been implemented? And then we also do this using the solvency assessment model that is applicable to the insurance companies, where we have to then provide certain contingencies in terms of liabilities for future claims. So the costing that we've done shows that with the current legislation as it is, about the combined ratio is about 88% of revenue is allocated towards current claims as well as future liabilities. But when we include all the amendments to the Act, it's going to increase this from 88% to 99.9%, which is almost 100% of assessments. That is then assuming that with the improvement in benefits, there is no resulting increase in assessments or in the rates that the employers are paying. There is no intention to increase the assessments of the employers. So that's the costing that we've done. What we will also do the same costing again once the committee is completed with the bill. If there's any changes, for example, also then do those costings to check whether we still need to keep the assessment rates also the same based on the changes that are being made on the bill. Honorable Graham asked the question, how many systems we've changed in the past 10 years or so. So we've had 3 systems that we've used in the fund. One of the first systems was the SEP ICM system that was implemented as part of the department's PPP contract with Siemens at the time. So the fund didn't pay. There wasn't any specific amount that was to be paid because everything that the department paid was part of the interim fee that was paid for the ICT service provisioning of the department. So there wouldn't be any specific cost attached to ICM other than the normal IT costs that were paid as part of the operations of the fund and the department. In 2014, the fund moved from the SEP ICM, because you'd note that even with the implementation of ICM, the control environment as well as the service delivery environment at the fund had not improved. And it was largely due to the fact that we still had a lot of manual processes that were supporting the system. Employers still had to submit papers to Pretoria for these papers to be captured on the system and claims to be assessed and adjudicated. So what a decision that was taken in 2014 was that while we have the system that may not necessarily be addressing our issues, we need to pilot an online system that has the required clinical coding rules that enable faster and speedy processing of claims as well as medical claims. And a decision was then taken to pilot using the system that was used by REN Mutual Assurance at the time, which when we implemented in the compensation fund, it was called Umehluko. So we did not buy the system, but we were paying for the use of the system over the 5-year period that it was used. And I think at the end of the pilot, after the first 2 years, we then determined that the system, an online platform, does work, and it does bring about improvements in the rate at which we process claims. However, the system had limitations with regard to some of the controls that were required. And that's why we decided we would then need to go back to SEP system that was using before, but we then needed to use an enhanced SAP system that would take into account all these other online features that we've seen, that we've liked in the Umehluko system. Hence, we implemented the COMPETITIVENESS system, which is the third system that we've used now. So it was more of us going back to SAP, but using a much more improved SAP system. This time around, I think we can see the online, currently now with the COMPETITIVENESS system, employers have to really come to the compensation fund and want to submit things manually because we've created a platform for them to be able to do so online. The costs, for Umehluko, over the 5-year period that we've used, we've paid, I think, about 221 million. We were paying around 44 million rands a year in support as well as license costs. As I said, we were using the system under license.
Sorry, Mr. Mafate. Sorry. Honorable Bonani, can you please mute? Bonani, can you please mute? You are disturbing the meeting. Can Portia please phone Honorable Bonani and tell her to mute because he's disturbing the meeting. You may continue.
Thank you, Chair. So that's what 44 million a year that we paid on for the use of Umehluko. That was we paying for the use as well as for the license to use the system and the support that were being provided by the service provider. With regards to COMPETITIVENESS, we paid 128 million rands for the development and configuration of COMPETITIVENESS, which was a system. And we also then are contracted with the service provider to provide support and regular maintenance of the system on a monthly, on a daily basis. So what we have paid over the last 17 months of the use of the system, we've paid about 51 million rands support and maintenance. That's the cost of the system. What we're doing to get the doctors, we do know that, I think we've always said, and even in our stakeholder engagements with the healthcare fraternity, with the employers, we do know that things aren't perfect in the compensation fund. And we also have a history of non-payment as well as inefficiencies, which has led to many people not being happy with us. So over the last 5 years, we have been intentional in our engagements with stakeholders to try and engage with them on even on changes that we're making in the fund, as well as getting inputs on some of the things that they're not happy with that we need to improve with. So obviously, some of the things we have implemented, obviously others that are not implementable, we have not implemented. But this is an ongoing process to try and reach out to providers. The unfortunate thing, though, is that we also do have as I pointed out earlier, that certain people stand to gain from the inefficiency of the compensation fund. So they would not want to see any messages that related to improvements in the fund and so on. And how they have sought to keep themselves relevant also has been to also influence some of the key stakeholders that we have to say that things are not working, certain things are not working and so on. So you find some of the stakeholders do talk about the things that are not working in the fund without necessarily having even interacted with the fund in the first place, but based on what they would hear from third parties and others who are wanting to sell their services at the expense of the compensation fund. The internal processes around disciplinary processes, so these are different, it depends. A lot of the cases we take not more than 6 months, but in some cases you do find that cases get dragged on, either because of the parties that are being charged for misconduct, wanting postponements and so on. But we do then track this, but the processes are not as prolonged. There was also a question asked around some of these fraud cases and what we're doing. So there's a lot of cases that are before the law enforcement agencies where we've done fraud, where we've investigated, we've completed our investigations, we've handed over the matters to the law enforcement agencies. One of the biggest frustration is the fact that the turnaround time from the law enforcement agencies is not as we would want it to be. We have a number of cases that we have reported once we've completed, involving external parties, syndicates that have organized themselves to prey on the compensation fund and its beneficiaries. And a large number of these matters are with the law enforcement agencies, and we're not getting the satisfactory turnaround, unfortunately, that we want to get these matters finalized. We are seeing, even in some of the cases where we've found some medical practitioners or some parties guilty in court, some of these cases are old cases that would have been reported by the fund many years ago. So that's just but we are continuing to engage with the law enforcement agencies to make sure that some of our things get prioritized, but we're not getting it the way that we would want. The issues around audit, people that are being flagged for audit. So this is one of the controls. Earlier on, I spoke about some of the weaknesses that the Auditor General had picked up around our revenue management processes. So one of our weaknesses was that the fact that a person who submits a return this year and realizes that if I become honest, I pay a lot of money. Next year, when I have to then declare what my payroll is, I will declare a much lower payroll so that I don't have to pay a much more revenue than I paid last year. So some of the rules that we built in the system was that the system should flag such instances, especially if the variance of between last year and this year's earnings exceeds 30%, for example. That must flag it for audit. Then we then have to force an employer to submit certain information that would then verify what he or she has declared to us before we can then lift the the audit flag and allow the employer to be able to then continue with the assessment, and so that they can be able to get the letter of good standing. So that's just one of those controls that we've implemented to make sure that we deal with the control weaknesses that are in the revenue side. The Honorable Mkonto asked about the budget cuts and whether we've experienced. So the compensation fund is not funded from the fiscus, so we are funded from the levies that we collect from employers. However, what we have been impacted on is the fact that we know that the COVID-19 has impacted workplaces. We are also seeing it. We've currently started our return of earnings season, and we are seeing that a lot of earnings that were declared last year, there is a huge reduction in the earnings this year because of retrenchments that would have taken place, and a lot of employees and employers who would not have been in the workplace in the last financial year. So we are anticipating that our revenue is going to take a knock. What we budgeted for as the revenue for 2021, 2022 might be slightly less than what we anticipated. We will do those adjustments when we adjust the budgets in September. So that's where the impact is going to be. But on the and also on the admin side, because a number of things that we're not doing, there's limited travel. There's also, we found other ways of trying to be efficient in working, which would result in less costs than what we would normally have had when everybody was working from the office. So these are some of the savings that we're going to see on our expenditure side. While we're also going to see reductions in the revenue. The monitoring of stakeholders are a great job. So our investments are done through the Public Investment Corporation. By law, we're required to invest all our surpluses through the Public Investment Corporation. So there are MOUs, there's also service level agreements that have been entered into with the Public Investment Corporation with regards to how they manage our investments. We issue them with a mandate letter on an annual basis, where we then also set conditions that they have to then adhere to, and they report and monitor the compliance to that SLA on a quarterly basis to the investment committee of the board as well as to management. The Black asset managers, Honorable Nonsel, I think that's the one question that I have not responded to. Your second question, I think I've responded to it when I was responding to Honorable Mkonto's question around budget cuts. So we have been able to deal with budget cuts well, and I think also the fact that we've allowed, one of the things that we were fast in doing at the beginning of the pandemic was to resource our staff to be able to operate remotely. And this has also yielded results, because we're also seeing it also in the fact that the services of the fund for the last financial year have largely been impacted less. With our turnaround times have become were stable, and we were able to deal with a large number of claims despite the fact that we had these disruptions. The Black Asset Manager Program. So in the last year, we had this in our strategic, we started it as part of the strategic plan for 2020, 21 to 2025. So in the first year, what we needed to do was to get the fund as well as the PIC ready for being able to implement this program. So we had given the PIC about a year to get themselves ready, because from the PIC side also, they then need to get their procurement in order to be able to source some of these and identify some of these black asset managers. It's only now in this current year where we're then saying that we'll do the allocation and we'll increase it progressively over the period of the strategic plan. So the objective here, we don't want to just give money to black asset managers. We're saying we want to contribute to growing the industry. So growing the industry, you will then be identifying some of the emerging asset managers. So there is that process that PIC then need to do, so that they can then identify, so that we grow them, so that once they've benefited from a program such as that of the compensation fund, they can be able to be sustainable enough to attract other funds elsewhere to manage. So that's the whole objective of this program. So Chairperson, I think your question also, I attended to it in terms of the 2019, where we did indicate indeed that there is that action plan. I think the misunderstanding from our side, as I said, we thought that as we produce these reports, we would be called to the committee to present them. I know that we presented the plan in 2019 when the committee was still new, and we had anticipated that would be called to come and present the progress that we're making with regard to the plan. But what we will do then, we will make sure that we religiously submit the progress reports on a quarterly basis, even without fail, without necessarily having to wait to be called to present it. Chair, I think I've responded to all the questions. Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if the DG is back.
No, thank you very much, Commission. I hear you are saying you may have misunderstood us in terms of you having to submit quarterly reports. It's always my belief, and that's why I always advise that if you don't understand what is then being requested or raised by the committee, feel free to ask that, so that you don't come and create an impression and a perception that you are not taking us serious. Because if you don't ask, that's what we will come to a conclusion that we are not taken serious by the compensation fund. And I don't think we have got any energy of having to deal with perceptions. The energy that we're having is that all entities under the Department of Labor are performing well. And unfortunately, you are one of those entities that are really a headache to ourselves and for different reasons. Ourselves is to ensure that there is work. I'm forced to raise this. I hope the DG is in. That because you are not encountering these challenges now that we have got the pandemic. It's an entity that we inherited, which had close to more than 5 disclaimers. So it means there is a challenge, which may be IT, which may be a systems problem, but I'm forced to ask the morale of your staff. I'm raising this because maybe you'll have, as the leader of the organization, you'll have to take the knock. But I think it's about time that I think in an appropriate time, we really tease out everything that is making this entity to be in this challenge, internally and externally. And when I mean externally, I mean those that are forever complaining. Maybe as we really move forward with this, we'll have to look into this. And DG, at the end, after all said and done, the buck stop with first yourself administratively and also with your political principal, because we can't have a situation that you have an entity that is still grappling. And I think as the committee, we will have to, I know it's an emotive challenge, this thing of compensation fund. At times we look one-sided, where we think we're representing our constituencies. We have got that right. But at times we'll really have to be, as members of the committee, rise above and lower our tempers and begin to say, we've got an entity that we must salvage, and what then becomes our responsibility. So I hope we're not going to come back. Now you heard what members have said. Prove to us that you are taking, as you have committed yourself, that it's not that you are not taking this committee serious. And all the information that we needed, it must be tabled to us. I just want, I'm sure I haven't missed, if I have missed it, but it's not here, I don't see it. Nedlac and Productivity SA, they have not costed their programs in terms of budget and expenditure. Can we get that? And so that if it's not here, we receive that before we, so that when we are preparing for our reports and deliberations in the report of the committee, we have that, because it's really going to be very important that we have that. So please, by the end of today, because the report is going to be prepared, the committee staff is to prepare the report. We are meeting next week, so by the end of today, I must get that response. That I see.
Sure, Chairperson.
Okay, it's given an indication that that is then going to happen. I think, honorable members, it's one of those unfortunate days for us. The DG is held up in something, was a burglary in his house. I think a number of things have been stolen. The police are busy with him. The DM is not here. The minister is not here. I don't know whether the DG has managed to catch the latter part, so that if there's anything that he wants to ask, he want to respond to, he can respond to that. I just want to check with members if is there anything that would like to just straight to the point. If are there any clarities in the presentations that you would love to just get clarities on, so that when we prepare for our budget vote, we prepare on issues that we think that either they have sufficiently responded or they have not been sufficiently responding, because we must not raise things in our recommendations and observations on issues that we have never asked them to clarify, because they can just say, but we're not asked this. If we have given an opportunity to respond, we would have responded at that time. I can see there is DG, before I close, is DG around? By the looks, he is not around, although he has logged in.
Chair, I am around.
Okay.
Chair, I am around. Thank you very much. I've been trying to switch on my video as well. It seems to me there's a problem. Chair, I heard a bit of what you said, and I agree with you. At the end of the day, the buck stops with myself, the minister, the deputy minister, and we're doing our best to make sure that the fortunes of this entity are turned. We have not lost hope that this entity is going to change, and we're really pushing very, very hard. It might seem like we're failing, but every inch of what we have is dedicated to ensuring that this entity works very well. So we've heard what the committee is saying, we've heard what the chairperson, your summary chairperson, we've taken that to heart, and we will make sure that whatever needs to be submitted, it will be submitted. Chair, just wanted to make that commitment. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, DG. I think, honorable members, we've come to the end of the presentation and responses. Next week, we are going to meet. Next week, nothing has changed for now. So we must all prepare. Our budget vote is the 14th of this month. So we must prepare. So we'll prepare. We'll meet again on Wednesday, so that we are then able to prepare, having adopted our report. Having said that, thank you very much, Productivity SA and Nedlac. By the end of today, please. It can't be any other day. Unfortunately, it must be by the end of today. You will circulate that to Portia, who must give you her email address, because he's the one now who's standing in for Mr. Sakaza. Having said that, thank you very much, honorable members. Let's enjoy our weekend until we meet again next week on Wednesday. Our meeting stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and the honorable members.
Thank you, Chair, and goodbye to members.